What is going on, folks? This is Acid. So I'm going to review the soundtrack to the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck from 2003. Now, this kind of made a lot of noise just because it was actually a pretty popular soundtrack. And the thing about it was it kind of started to accurately predict. It's kind of a post-grunge and slightly new metal album, but the new metal is very lightly tinged. But it kind of started to kind of somewhat predict that new metal wasn't going to be around, or was kind of starting to phase out, and it was early 2003, so that hadn't quite entirely happened yet, but it was kind of on the cusp of happening. So it's kind of more of like post grunge songs from like folks like Puddle of Mud and Stain and some of those type folks, more of those more overcast ones, even Creed and some of those type bands. But I would have to say that there is some popularity to this album. It had a number of singles from it, and it did have some exclusives, which really kind of helped it out. But I was surprised at this popularity, because I would probably say that this is more popular than a couple of the Spider-Man soundtracks. Now, Spider-Man in 2002 had the Stone Sour song, and in 2004 it had the Vindicated song. But this album really sold waves just because of the Evanescence song Bring Me to Life, which really turned out to be a smash hit. And basically, the Evanescence album wound up going like 6 or 7 times platinum, but like this album sold a decent amount too, just because of that. And there were some other exclusives on here. I was pretty prompt by this album just being able to secure exclusives and that type stuff. There are some pretty clever and cool moments overall that I would have to say, and it's definitely kind of a charming thing on this album, just because I'm definitely glad for the fact that there's actually some reasons to buy it. It's not just, oh, you could get this out, you can get this song on Rob Zombie's album, so there's no point to get this. There actually is some moments on here that kind of have there are some moments on here that kind of have like a certain amount of charm to them. But yeah, this is kind of like a post grunge, but then it just strikes me as more of like an alternative metal kind of album. It's just kind of an amalgamation of like kind of bloodletting, kind of like hardcore metal and that type of stuff that just kind of has its emotions more on its sleeve. It's not quite an emo album, but it's not quite like post, it's really kind of like a more rosy kind of post grunge type album. I mean, Creed is not really emo, and neither is like Puddle of Mud, but I do kind of feel like it's just kind of, because this is kind of more of like a bruised album. It just has a lot more, hey, you're kind of in your feels a little bit more this time, more so than like certain kind of post grunge bands kind of are. And I think that's something to be said, that it just is a lot, like I said, it's just more rosy and kind of more bruised than like certain other projects, but it sticks out. I mean, it works in a good way. It suits this album. Daredevil is a pretty good movie, and I would definitely recommend. That's kind of one of the more charming Marvel movies from the early 2000s. It's as good as like Spider-Man 1 and 2, and it's definitely one of the better ones. It definitely kicks a lot of ass. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner and Michael Clark Duncan do a great job on there, but this just has like some real nice, good vibes to it. That kind of, it has some club songs, it has some blue collar songs, it has like some kind of backyard songs just for kind of vibing a little bit. We'll get into that, but I guess I'll talk about the singles because there were 5 of them. So the first single is Won't Back Down by Fuel. And this is kind of like a club song in a rock sense. This kind of has like a real nightlife kind of setting. I definitely like the kind of energetic, kind of more up tempo and kind of, yeah, definitely kind of night venue kind of feel towards it. It definitely has some nice energy, and the hook's pretty wicked also. There's a lot of solid energy in the hook that kind of kicks ass. And I just would have to say, I appreciated this one. It's not quite as catchy as Bring Me to Life, but it does serve as like a nice kickoff to the album. I definitely feel like it's definitely kind of like a party starter and an easy one to kind of starting to get turned up to. It's not full blown where the notch is turned up all the way, but it's definitely like maybe a 7, 7.5 in terms of energy, in terms of how amped up it kind of gets. So I would definitely appreciate that one. Caught in the Rain is the second single, and this is by Revis, and I don't know if that's how you say their name, but Revis is, I mean, this is kind of more of a makeshift blue collar kind of song. It's in no ways like a club song, just kind of something that you'd listen to pretty much in the car on the way to work or on the way home. Just kind of has a nice mellow kind of bop to it. Yeah, Caught in the Rain just kind of has like, I mean, it's important to kind of have some of these just as far as like just kind of more day to day kind of sequencing and kind of getting through the day, that type stuff as far as that kind of goes. But this is kind of one that I talk about that's a little bit kind of, you know, it just has kind of like a chip on its shoulder, I would have to say, but I do appreciate it. I don't really know who Revis is, but I like the energy that they kind of had in the chorus because I wasn't expecting it to kind of be that furious considering how calm the verses kind of are. So it's kind of interesting to kind of get that kind of dichotomy of energy there that's kind of halfway calm but then halfway kind of ramped up in a way. So I kind of appreciated that, but it does kind of have a chip on its shoulder. And For You is like the third single, and this is by The Calling. I don't know them that well either, but this one is kind of more of like a hammy, kind of romantic kind of song. I do feel like it's necessary to kind of have this, but this is kind of more in the heroism of, hey, kind of more in like boyfriend kind of vibe, that type stuff. It kind of struck me as is where, yeah, I'm going to be the hero and that sort of thing. I mean, it's kind of the chorus is kind of sappy a little bit, but it does have the emphasis of just trying to say that this is a superhero movie. So it's kind of the concept of heroism kind of has to do with that. So I kind of look after it. I mean, I will give this song an almost song. It's not quite one that's like is the reason why I would buy this album, but the fact that it is an exclusive to the album and it's on here and you can't find it anywhere else, and it's actually pretty decent, just kind of showcases the vibe towards it. But it is a solid song, I would have to say. Like, I mean, to me, I mean, on top of that, it's not really like it's not really like a riveting and up tempo kind of song as much as it is this kind of song you listen to in the car, just kind of cruising around. It's kind of mellow energy, this kind of real kind of calm bass vibes. It's kind of almost like a makeshift song, just kind of in a more romantic sense. So that's two songs in a row that are kind of more this kind of laid back, but still kind of have like that. I mean, it just kind of has that anguish to it, which I really like the particular context and vibe about this album. Just kind of having like a real anguish sense. I mean, not every single movie soundtrack captures the energy the way that each one of these songs kind of does. It just kind of has that feel of just like, hey, you know, this is kind of bruised a little bit. So that's pretty good. And Bring Me to Life. The next two singles are Evanescence songs. I really would have liked if Evanescence would have given this album exclusives. I think if it had, I guarantee this album would have sold more. I mean, I know a song as large as Bring Me to Life pretty much had to be on the Evanescence album, but if it had been on Daredevil, that would have been the reason to purchase this project. If it had been a Daredevil exclusive, it's just that good a song. This is kind of a club bop. This is one that you can play at a rave, a dance club, a nightclub, that type of stuff. Very much weekend material. Great hook. Amy Lee does a great job on there. Great energy in the song. Just a nice up tempo kind of clashy kind of song that just works with fantastic dramatic energy. It's just a great song. Still, all these years later, it still continues to be. I've heard it on the radio in recent times, so it's still a popular song. And yeah, I really kind of would have liked for Evanescence to have given this album an exclusive because it definitely needed it. I mean, Evanescence was fly as fuck back in 2003. They were selling like hotcakes. That's kind of the thing. But the fifth single, which kind of distantly came out after the carry out energy of Bring Me to Life, was My Immortal. And it's actually surprising that this was on Daredevil because for a PG-13 movie, this has a pretty overcast and just completely swampingly depressed kind of energy. This just feels like a song that you'd hear at a wake or a funeral or something, but that's really kind of like the true gothic apex of Evanescence is just being able to nail songs like that. It's just great. I mean, it's a real kind of sombering song, but it's just so awesome that it's almost too powerful for the soundtrack, considering that nothing else on this album has that kind of sombering energy about it. It's just really kind of um like like morose. And that's just kind of the thing, but it is a great song. So now I'm going to go ahead and talk about the rest of the album. So out of 20 songs, this album is packed to the gill. So they went balls to the wall as far as trying to be able to get like a bunch of songs on here. You're gonna find Drowning Pool with Rob Zombie on here. You're gonna find Chevelle. You're gonna find Moby. You're gonna find Nappy Roots. You're gonna find Nickelback. You're gonna find Saliva, Seether, 12 Stones, Hoobastank, Fuel, Finger 11. So there's just plenty of stuff on here that just has like they got a lot of pretty big bands to really contribute, and a lot of them do pretty excellent in terms of quality. And that's just kind of the thing. But I'm gonna go ahead and list the 13 songs that I recommend to you. Two of them are almost songs, but still pretty solitary energy. So the 11 songs I recommend to you would be The Man Without Fear by Drowning Pool featuring Rob Zombie, Bring Me to Life by Evanescence, My Immortal by Evanescence, Sad Exchange by Finger 11, Won't Back Down by Fuel, the Daredevil theme, which is kind of, it's not by any band, but it's like this. I'll look that up in a second. Right Before Your Eyes by Hoobastank, Learn the Hard Way by Nickelback, Bleed for Me by Saliva, Hang On by Seether, and Let Go by 12 Stones. That's 11 songs. The two almost songs were Caught in the Rain by Revis and For You by The Calling. So those are the two singles I talked about. But so the Daredevil, the Daredevil theme was by Graham Revell and Mike Einziger. So that's kind of, I mean, pretty good riveting kind of thing. I definitely feel like if you like the energy, and I'm going to talk about some of these, like a couple of the club bops and kind of more nightlife songs, or songs like The Man Without Fear, which Drowning Pool featuring Rob Zombie, because Dave Williams had died. He died like probably 6 months before this soundtrack came out. So unfortunately, I don't know if he was alive when they were trying to work on this song, but Rob Zombie just takes the vocals, and it's just the Drowning Pool band with Rob Zombie in the vocals, which is a pretty clever concept. I think more bands should do that more often, but this is a really dope song, and it definitely has like some nightlife and kind of rave and night venue type stepping out type vibes. And I also feel like another night song like that is Won't Back Down by Fuel, the lead single. And then the Daredevil theme does a pretty great job with that also. That does a pretty good job with it. So Hoobastank's Right Before Your Eyes kind of has like a more kind of uppity kind of feel towards it. It definitely kind of feels like, I like the energy behind it, where it's kind of like things are getting ready to get started. This is kind of more of like a hustle kind of song, or it just kind of has like a lot more of a busy feel towards it. That song just has more of a busy feel. And I also kind of like the backyard vibes of Sad Exchange by Finger 11. It's kind of surprising how new metal that one sounded. I didn't realize that Finger 11 was kind of new metal. But there's like some backyard kind of smoking, powwow, having a few beer type vibes to Sad Exchange by Finger 11, and then Hang On by Seether. Seether really has one of the best beats on this whole album, with that kind of this real kind of almost summery feel, despite the fact that this is kind of more of a winter album. But Seether really nails like a real stylish and like truly captivating song with Hang On. Saliva kind of has another kind of busy sounding song like the Hoobastank song. This is kind of one that kind of has more like an errand type feel, kind of more going about your day and kind of having some errands to do and that type stuff's what it reminded me of. Just more busy and kind of uppity about it. Let Go by 12 Stones kind of reminds me of like the day is kind of over, kind of similar to like what Marcy Playground would do with some of those kind of hazy, like I don't want to say opioid influence, but just kind of more malaised and kind of just got off work type feels. It just really feels like the energy is kind of past and you're just kind of winding down for the day. That's what I caught from 12 Stones Let Go. I don't know 12 Stones that well, but I liked what I heard here. I'm trying to think of some other ones I haven't talked about. Like I definitely like the nightlife kind of energy of the Daredevil theme. I mean, it's a little bit kind of rambunctious, but I still feel like it does have some mild nightlife vibes that are kind of similar to like the Drowning Pool song. And like there's one other song that kind of did that. Oh yeah, the Won't Back Down. So those are definitely some great moments. Moby kind of didn't deliver. I would have liked for that one to have worked better. And I was kind of disappointed in the only rap song on here, Nappy Roots. I kind of felt like it just kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. This was not that interesting a production on here. And normally I know Moby for like doing like kind of more like techno type stuff. I kind of figured he would have given like this album. I kind of figured that Moby would have given this album some real kind of techno kind of energy, but he didn't. It just kind of had like a kind of mid tempo kind of makeshift kind of feel that just didn't really suit him that well. And there were a lot of kind of like Chevelle kind of dropped the ball. I was They were taking too long to get started with their kind of vibes. They just kind of had like I think they were kind of aiming for like a kind of backyard powwow kind of vibe, but it just didn't pull it off as well. The production just wasn't that interesting. And there's just a lot of bands on here that are kind of lower key. There's a lot of bands on here like Boys Set Fire, Autopilot Off, Palo Alto, some of these that just don't quite have enough kinetic energy to really connect. And I was kind of hoping for something more like the energy of some of these higher ones. But I just would have to say, I mean, still, 11 songs out of 20 is pretty damn good, especially for a soundtrack album, plus a couple almost songs. And the fact that these singles, there's so many of them, and a lot of them hit pretty cold, that's just a pretty good example. So out of like 10, to score this album out of 10, I'm going to give this album like a 7.25 because I feel like there's enough hits on here. Definitely some of my favorites would be, at least in terms of exclusives, it would be the Drowning Pool song, the Finger 11 song, the Hooba Stank song. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about Nickelback. I'll talk about them. So the Drowning Pool song, Finger 11 song, Hooba Stank song, the Fuel song, Won't Back Down. Those are just some immediate highlights, and the Seether song definitely. But oh yeah, to talk about Nickelback, like they kind of gave like a nightlife kind of bar song, something for stepping out, not so much being at like a house party or something like that, but definitely a song you'd hear at like a bar getting ready to have a round of drinks and flirt with some bartenders, that type stuff, those sorts of vibes. It just kind of has that sort of atmosphere. Forgot to talk about Nickelback, but the Nickelback song sticks out like a sore thumb. It really doesn't come off as post grunge or alternative metal at all, but it just kind of has like that hard rock, especially kind of at like a kind of pub or something like that kind of feel. It's just the most kind of rousing song on here, but just not in terms of a nightclub or a dance club. It just kind of has more of like a bar, get some beer mugs kind of vibe to it. But that's kind of the concept there. So that's another highlight depending upon if you step out. I mean, the Nickelback song doesn't have as much charm if you're not really going out for the night, but it is decent if you're doing that. But yeah, there's just a number of songs. Definitely the Drowning Pool song, definitely Finger 11, definitely Hooba Stank, definitely Seether, and definitely Fuel were some great moments. And I would probably even throw in like the kind of romantic kind of this blood this kind of mellow but this kind of passive aggressive romantic song The Calling did. I mean, it's an almost song, but I think it works charmingly enough that it just has like the right energy and definitely the right mood to kind of say it's solitary. But yeah, 7.25 out of 10, definitely a pretty stellar, and especially considering how many songs are on here, just how many songs that actually hit the nail on the head is pretty charming. And there's enough exclusives. There's a lot to talk about as far as that kind of goes. Has the night songs, has the blue collar songs, has like fun moments and exclusives and all that sort of stuff. So there's something that you're going to find. There's definitely something that you'll be able to find that just has a lot of valve to it, and just to be able to talk about really enjoying and having that sort of enjoyment. The social score I will give an 8.5 out of 10 because there's a lot of singles, the Fuel song, the Calling song, the Evanescence songs, just stuff like that, and oh yeah, the Revis song. So there's just plenty of moments on here. 8.5. I just feel like the only thing that's stopping this album from having like a 10 out of 10 in terms of the singles and the social score is just the fact that Evanescence did not supply this album with the exclusives. If they had done that, if Bring Me to Life had only been featured on this album and not if Evanescence had had other songs for like their 2003 album that came out in March 2003, I would have said, fuck it. Let's just go with that. You know, I would have said that, yeah, this would be a 10. But it's just, and that definitely would have upped the score on this album too. It would have went from like a 7.25 to like a 9 or something like that. But that just kind of happens to be a thing. So great album overall. Definitely good charm, good moments, plenty of nightlife. There are some club moments. There are some blue collar moments. There are some romantic moments. There are some just charming moments on here and just some good vibes. That's kind of the concept. in terms of that, like the future, there's really not much, just because the only real other thing in the Daredevil universe was just Elektra. So Daredevil is just kind of a one and done, but it definitely has some charm to it that's definitely worth investing in.